So very nice. Right, okay, we're up to the Chesamut Beis. Oh, 1 minute. Bottom line. Okay.
What's the record for pouring grape juice to someone?
Oh, Yehuda. Good morning, Yehuda. Yeah, what's the word for it? Please, that you can join us. I think, what? I haven't got Makar for it. No. I don't know the Makar for it. Yehuda Stern. Okay. Okay, let's get going. Right. Okay, we've got some tush. Let's get it. We're up to the Chesamut Beis bottom line. The whole sugya now, for sure, for Shami, nothing ever takes a long time. It's always very short. Is that what is the size of a revius? Now, this is a very, very hard question. If anybody remembers it, they deserve a l'chaim, but not from whiskey, it has to be from wine. Oh, what is the size of a revius in fingers in the Gemara Psachim? 2 by 2 by what? 2 by 2 is that? 2.5. No, exactly. How can you forget such a thing? You remember your name? You remember such a thing? Very close. 2 by 2 by 2.7. Etzba'im, al etzba'im, al etzba'im, bevum etzba'im, b'chatzi etzba, b'chimish etzba. 2 by 2 by 2.7. Which comes to how many fingers? Anybody knows the maths? 2 by 2 is 4. By 2.7 is 10.8. So if somebody says to you, how many fingers is a revius? We talked about Bachrikas Chazlishim Chaim Noam, we got very involved in it. And now we started yesterday with a few measurements which don't help us, unfortunately, because we don't have them. And the boy here continues with this topic. Tony, we learned in the Beis, it's the bottom line of Chesamut Beis. Chatzi shminis tevonis. Tevonis means from Tveria. Half of a cup called shminis in Tveria, top of Chesamut Aleph Hayashona, but the old cup. That is the cup. If you take half of it, is a revius. And it means if you ever get to a museum and it tells you this is the shminis tevonis, then you can take half of it. And joking about, the Chazon Ish, when he went to Meron, he only went once in his whole lifetime. He only went once in his lifetime to Meron. He went to measure the kavorim of Shammai there, the kuchin. I once went to say it myself, because the Gemara Bava Basra tells us how wide the kavorim use this, and we mentioned the divhan, which we saw online, is exactly fits in the Kutub Chaim Noah. Many different proofs. Divan is a weight of a grain or something. The kuchin, no, you ever been to Meron, you'll see there's a proper holes where they put dead bodies in. Okay, I'll get to the other point. If you ever get to Chatzis Tavoyonis, the old one, Omar Abiyechnon, how did it done? We still have it. We still have that measure. If we still have that measure, why would you call it the old one? If we still have that, if I say the old shilling and somebody say you've got a shilling nowadays, why is it called old one? So it says, we begin to have a biyomer. Sorry, that's part of the question. If we have it nowadays, is Dami Daviz became smaller, the Robsa became bigger. That means what we have today is not the exact measure because it became smaller than bigger. This Dami Des Era, it became smaller, but not smaller like it used to be. That means it became smaller, bigger than smaller, but not as small as it used to be. Either way, you cannot rely anymore on the nowadays Shminis Tevorionis because it's no good. Two fingers, and etzba'im by 2 fingers. On 1.556 fractions, 1.5 plus a third. It's quite hard to add fractions together. I don't know if you ever did it in school. You probably did, if you've forgotten it. How do you add a half to a third and make it a complete fraction? Lowest common denominator. That's a much better way of doing it. So half and a third, very quickly. Half, take 6, for example. Half of 6 is 3. A third of 6 is 2. Add the 2 together is 3 and 2 is 5. So it's 1 5/6. That is the correct way to the lowest common denominator. No, you cannot do it to decimals, it will not work, I'm afraid. Unless you use a calculator. If you want to use it in your head, I'm afraid it doesn't work. So again, so how many fingers is it? 2 by 2 by 1.56, 1 and 5, 6, which is actually 1.866666 recurring forever, which is a problem. Why is it a problem? Anybody can tell me what's the problem? No, much more fundamental problem. A minute ago, we discussed what the Gemara in Bavli asks. And what's the Gemara in Bavli say? 2 by 2 by 2.7. And here it's 2 by 2 by 1.86666, which is a quite big difference. It's about 3 fingers out. So Tesis in Pesachim Daf Ches asks the question. Tesis gives 2 answers. One is that the fingers in Tzipovi were different to the fingers elsewhere, which is very hard to understand. But alternatively, he says that the fingers we're using over here, whenever you take a diameter, so if you imagine a square and then you circle it off, the circle is always bigger than the square, right? If you've got a square and you try to circle it off, and the Gemara here is using the circle around the square because we're talking about a becher. Yes, right today. I was discussing this with a couple of people, and one person came in and said, you know what the difference is? It depends which part of the thumb you're measuring from, this part of the thumb or that part of the thumb. But he's wrong. Why is he wrong? Does anybody remember why we mentioned the Tesis in Bechiros? Because the Tesis in Bechiros says, whenever we talk about the finger, we always mean the thumb at its widest point. That whenever we say a finger, and we said, according to Chaim Noah, it's 2 centimeters. According to Chazdish, it's 2.4. Okay. Now the Gemara goes to a slightly different point. We're talking about measurements of revis. Revis of blood, if it would dry up and become into a solid, would it be more or less than the revis in volume? What would you say? Less. Now, this is the discussion of the Gemara. So what's the size if it dries up? Says the Gemara, the size of a kazais, Divi Abnosim. Why? It's the same shit. If you take a revis of blood and you dry it out and make it into a solid, or come into a kazayis. Here we have a topic which goes back and forth, a very simple point. We'll get it clear. Once you have the basic line clear, the whole thing's very simple. When an animal dies, so this week's parasha, donkey dies, what's the din? If you walk in the countryside and you see a dead donkey, if you touch it, what's the din? You're tummy. You have to tover, wait for nacht, and then you're tummy. If you touch the bone of a dead donkey, are you tummy? No. Only food, not that which cannot be eaten. So if let's say you go to an olden day shop and they sell you a spoon made out of a bone of a donkey, can you use it to eat your, what do you eat with? What do you use for it? To eat your rice? To eat the chash of rice? Okay. To eat your potatoes? Yes or not? Yes. Why? Oh, you don't want to be tummy. A bone is not a tummy. If they come and give you a piece of meat of a dead donkey, you will become tummy chashom if you touch it. Now, the bone will also be parva. Yes, the bone is actually parva. It's a very important point. Okay. Bone is parva, plus it doesn't make you tummy. But what about blood? Would you say blood is like meat, or would you say it's like bone? That is the question. And another question is, if it is tummy, then how much does it need to make you tummy? A revis or less than a revis? That is the question over here. That's all we're asking. So first question is it bechlal tummy? And if it is tummy, how much of it do you need to make you tummy? So Gemara tells us a story that there was once a donkey of Rabbi Shemesa. It died. They said, don't worry, there's no tumas nevela over here. How much were the mitai? Why did he ask him how much were the mitai? And I explained to you very simply. He wasn't sure what the reason they were mitai the blood is because they said that the blood is like a bone. And since it's like a bone, it makes no difference how much blood. It's always going to be toy, because even if it's 100 liters, it's fine. Or maybe really it is tummy like meat. The reason they said it's toy is simply because it wasn't enough blood. So he said, they refused to answer him. Till this is toy, more than this is tummy. So what does he hold? That blood is tummy. The problem is that it was only a small amount of blood. So he was upset with Simon. They never replied to him. Rabbi said of exactly the same story, that the donkey died, left blood, and they made it toy. Is it up to a vis and more than that is tummy? He was asking if there's a question mark. or not, or Boat Beis. So Bibi kicked him. He asks you a fundamental question. You kick him. I wasn't able to think, so that's why I kicked him. Meaning that my mind was not miyushav. So let's get it very, very clear. If somebody asks you the blood of an avela, dead donkey, tomei or toy, there are two questions you need to find out. One, what's the first question? Fundamental. Is it bechlal tomei? Maybe it's like a bone which is not tomei, or maybe it's like meat that is tomei. And if it is tomei, what size? So the Ma'aseh Nadigal goes with a tiny tangent. Why was he not able to think? And the Gemara answers that in the olden days, most people, if they wanted to have any sort of financial security, they had to have land. Nowadays, stocks and shares, whatever it may be, but land was the main thing. Because if you didn't have any land, where would you get bread from? So a normal person who was wealthy would get his own land. If you're poorer than that, you would buy from a wholesaler. Poorer than that, you would buy from some retailer. Poorer than that, you'd have to rely on baking your own bread every day. Now, the lower you go, what happens is the more fear you have. Because if you're buying bread every day, for all you know, you go to the shop, there's no bread there. It's very different. It's very hard to understand it nowadays, where we're so used to going to the shop, buying a loaf of bread. We don't see it as a tremendous klolo. But Bibi was unfortunately at the lowest level of the spectrum. And therefore, he was forced to go every day to buy bread. And he said, because of that, I was unable to think. And that's why I kicked you and you asked me the question. So he said to like this, your life hangs in balance. If you buy wheat once a year, so your life hangs in balance because you don't know if you'll have it next year. You would be scared day and night. That's even more dangerous. There's somebody who buys from a retailer. There's somebody who buys bread every day. I rely on the baker, and therefore I couldn't answer your question. I looked, I did not find any like interesting shot, but that's what the Gemara says. It says, well, what is the din regarding the blood of an avela? It's toy. So he says it's a toy. At this stage of the Gemara understands when he says it's toy. What do you mean it's toy? Somebody asked, answer. What do you mean it's toy? Toy that what? Yeah, but and why is it toy? Because like a bone, and therefore it makes no difference how much. Why would we say that's pshat? Because when you say something is toy without explaining yourself, pashtus it means completely toy. Never toy. Says it more. Malto you can push away. Toy melahachshit. We always have a famous halacha that all food, this is again in this week's parasha, any food that has water falling on it, it only becomes tummy if water fell on this. If you've got an apple which never got wet, then it will never become tummy, even if it goes into the house of dead body, if it touches by a dead body. So the Gemara says, toy, it means that it's not considered a liquid. Now, we know how many liquids are there that make things machshir? 7. What are the 7? One of them is blood. Oh, Levi's on the ball. Well, the question is, so how can the ball be a still a damn not? What's the answer? No, tell us that. Very.
Human blood.
Oh, that means not all blood is called blood. We actually had it in Eruvin. Only blood which comes out b'shas shchita, not blood which is left inside the body. This is not the normal blood. Says the Gemara, that's what it means, toy. We're not talking about toy. Of course it's tomei, but we mean toy melachship. Avle tamu is betame. Says the Gemara, no. Tamon tanino, we learned there. Damashers kibsoroi metame. Ve'eno machship, ve'eno nu kayotze boy. A sheretz. How much is a sheretz betame? How much is a sheretz betame? Kol shuch bechadosho. The size of a lentil. And the blood of a sheretz is also betame bechadosha, but it's not machshir. And there's nothing like it. So the Gemara understands at this stage, but there's no other blood which is tummy. But Biderman writes, why is it sheretz got such a level of tumah? Because sheretz comes from the word rots. Sheretz, it keeps running around. They talk about like creepy crawlies, right? The one with centipede is a sheretz. It's got 100 legs. So he says, some dude rushes around his life, constantly looking for ways to provide himself panosov to succeed. That is such a person is Tommy. It's a derech drush. Anyway, so the Gemara says, we see over here, there's nothing like it, meaning only the blood of a sheretz is betame, no other blood. Oh, says the Gemara, no. You can't compare. There, the Shiur Tumasa Shetomim Tamei Kibsoi. There, the tumah is the size of a lentil of the blood of a sheretz. But maybe the blood of a preda of a donkey or mule could be the size of a kviz. So we've got no raya. So the rights of the more like this. I'm obviously speak about train amoyoin. Chadam atomei v'chadam atomei. Mandam atomei Rabbi Yehuda. He holds like Rabbi Yehuda. Mandam atoy k'b'shobem pesayah. Amalei Rav Duma to the chayse v'yos. You're right. How do I know that you're right? That Rabbi Yehuda holds his tummy. Rabbi Yehuda, he was the Rav of the Beis Nasi of Rabbi's house. And they made it that when the donkey died, they said only up to a versus tummy no more. So, I'm sorry, up to a versus tummy no more. So he holds its tummy. So you've got actually two shittas as to whether a dam neveda is matame. Again, there's one man dam ashtas of Yisroel and Pesera that what? That it never creates tummy. You can actually take a bucket full of blood of a dead mule and you will not become tummy. Shittas Rabbi Yehuda is more machme. He says you are tummy, but only how much? Only by reverse and not by less. Says the Mishnah says that you have to be very careful. You take from them machzah shekel, because if you take people who accuse you either that you became wealthy by stealing or poor because you stole. Tony Rabbi Shimon covets. Somebody who's got long hair, lo yitru. He's not allowed to take machzah shekel. Does anybody know why somebody who's got long hair is not allowed to take machzah shekel? Not allowed to be the treasurer. Because you can hide it in his hair if they are chashad, very good. They would feel his woolen clothes as he came out. Because if you got a smart jacket like this, right, very fancy jacket, you can start hiding in the lining. So somebody would come and feel it. Says the Gemara, not only that. They would chat to him the entire time. Does anybody know why they would chat to the person? No. Even better. Because if you didn't talk to him, you could hide the money in his mouth. So by talking to him all the time, it would stop him from hiding his mouth. Just tell him to fill up his mouth with water, and then he won't be able to hide anything. Well, for a minute or two. Yes, you can. You can be through those. There's a bracha. You should be aware that every time you do anything in the Beis Hamikdash, you make a bracha. As Raman talks about it, for example, say the night for the eaten Korban Pesach would have made a bracha. Asher Yisroel Korban Pesach. So he has to make a bracha. Asher Yisroel Lifosh Truma. So therefore, he can't fill his mouth with water. So therefore, we have to chat to him all the time. It's unbelievable how careful we are. No. He would go into the room himself, fill up buckets of money. So he would then come out with buckets full of money. For all you know, he slipped a few coins inside his mouth. No, so you chat to him all the time. He makes the bracha, and then you carry on chatting to him. He has got time. Says the, no, it hasn't. He goes in. There's a mitzvah to separate from the room full of coins. Says the in 3 different places we've learned what no, the Jews will wait for the next parak discusses what do we do with the money. Goes to Beis Mikdash. What Sadosh Adam Tzorch Lotzis the Abiyas, a person has to be careful. Gederech Shu Tzorch Lotzis the Amokim. But Torah 9 Dechsiv Yisim Nekim Hashem U'Yisrael by Chad, but they got of the Reuven, they kept the promise, and the Torah says they have to be clean in the eyes of Hashem and Kal Yisrael. But the Vim 9 Dechsiv Keilu Lekim Hashem V'Goyma, and the pasuk for this is off. The Hashem Yodei Yisrael Hu Yedai Beberedu V'Mamad. That's a very interesting story. That shortly after Yeshua was nifter, what happened was they got that they lived on the other side of the yard, and what did they do? Anybody know? They built a huge mizbeach, and the whole of Klal came to war to destroy them. Why? Because you're not allowed to make a mizbeach on the other side of the yard. It was a time of Shiur when the bombers were awesome. So they said we didn't make a mizbeach to bring korbanos, but because there's a river in between, one day your descendants will tell our descendants that you're not part of Klal Yisrael. So we're building a mizbeach which will remind you and us that we are part of Klal Yisrael. But they made the promise that we are clean in the eyes of Hashem. So you see, they have to be clean in the eyes of Hashem. And finally, B'ksuvim 9 Dechsiv Motzachim V'Seichotei B'nei Elikim V'Odom Gamliel Zuga Shal Rabbi Yossi Berebi Bun. Which pasuk is the clearest of them all? Because there the pasuk says clearly you have a mitzvah to be nokim Hashem u'miyisol, and the Moshe has got very interesting tshuva as to what exactly is the Yisroel Dvorim that a person has to be clean in the eyes of people. He brings 2 tzadim. One is because a person himself might end up doing something wrong, or the other one is that people might think of him doing something wrong. So what happens in the case where there's no chance of a person doing something wrong, but others might think he's doing wrong? Does he have to be careful of Yisim Nakim? Okay, he's a whole shuv about it. Okay, it says the Mishnah. So based on Gamliel, we had this once before. That means you have a room full of coins. The family based on Gamliel wanted that their money should go in, so they would walk in and throw the money into the bucket because they wanted, well, any of the buckets, they wanted that their money should get in. Because we're going to learn that once they took the 3 buckets, they never used the rest of the money for the karbonis, they used it for other things. So they wanted that they should be first. The one who took it would push it inside the box to make sure that they would get it. 3 times you'd ask them, should I separate? And they would say, yes, separate. Should I separate? They say, yes, separate. Should I separate? Just separate. Where else do we see this concept that we repeat things 3 times?
The food dish to see whether the light, not food, the pomade to see whether it's light in the morning. Yeah?
Someone more to the point, I hope you would say, by the Ksira So'imer, some more Menachas. If you read the word, they would say, should I cut Exoy, Ktsoy, Exoy, Ktsoy, Exoy, Ktsoy? That's what the Chidom many times. I don't remember that in Newman. No, the word there just says Bar Koi. It doesn't say it says Bar Koi 3 times. Bar Koi. Torah Mesel. Now, what happened was, very briefly, we would have people sending in the Machzah Shekel straight away. People took longer, people took even longer, depending on how close you were to the Beis Hamikdash. Maybe I say it outside and afterwards do it inside. What happened was like this: you'd go into the room, there would be thousands and tens of thousands of coins. You take 3 big buckets. How much does each bucket have inside it? 3 sa'ah. Each sa'ah is 15 kilos, so it's 45 kilo. Each bucket has 45 kilo. Then you would take out the 3 buckets, then you'd spread a piece of leather across all the coins. Then all the people that gave afterwards would put their money in. Then you'd come just before Shavuos and again take 3 buckets and then spread the leather on. And then the 3rd time, they would come till Sukkot and then you'd spread the leather on. Why? Once you've taken some, you can't use the rest. Since you can't use the rest for the korbanos, therefore what would happen is we don't want to take again. So by spreading a leather, it's like putting a plastic sheet across to make sure that nobody should reuse that again. And it was always put Shiur alishka, which later the Gemara will talk about it much later, what to do with it. Oh, what happens if they run out of money? The more Mishnah talks about just that. Says the Mishnah is Torah you take the first time the chipah b'katav lois, you covered it with leather skins. Hashniya, second time the chipah b'katav lois. Hashlishis be'mechapa. The 3rd time you didn't need to cover. Anybody know why I didn't need to cover? Very good. There's nothing else to do. Once you don't want to take from something which you've already taken from. Thomas, are you sure you know the first time you took L'Shem Eretz Yisrael from people in Eretz Yisrael? Vashniya L'Shem Prochim Ukofino, the cities around it. Vashlish is L'Shem Bavel, L'Shem Modai, or L'Shem Medinus Avachik, stop of Testament base. You would go for the faraway countries. Says the Gemara. The Gemara asks, what were the people basically even thinking? There's no halachic significance of having your coin pushed in. On the contrary, the halacha is that once you took, it was yours, whatever happened. It says, let's say you've got 2 piles of wheat. And what happens is you take 2 on 1 for both. What's the din? It's all good. So what does basically Gamliel want by pushing their coin in? They wanted that their money should be in it. So therefore, it was like a certain nachas ruach, a certain pleasure for them. Tony, if by mistake the skins fell off, nasa kulon shiraim, you couldn't use any of them. Can you imagine such a thing? Imagine the coin came for the 2nd time, and he found that the skin, the leather, the plastic has come off. So what happens? He can't use any of them. Why? Because the ones that he took from last time made the remainder shiraim. So he's got shiraim next to the new. You can't use any of them. Tony, that had the most money. Why? If you remember, we discussed earlier that if you lived far away, so you'd have to bring it to Yerushalayim. So let's say you are a representative of the people of Manchester. So people of Manchester say, how do you need another in Manchester? 20,000 need them. So 20,000 is 20,000 silver coins. It's very, very heavy. So what could you do? Change it for gold. Now, could you change it for diamonds? Anybody remember? We had it before Shekalim. Can you change it for diamonds? No. Why can't you change it for diamonds? because diamonds fluctuate a lot in price. Gold doesn't. This is the Shiur. Okay. But you could change it to gold. Now, the first time you did Truma was just after Chodesh Nisan. So which money came from the people in Eretz Yisrael? Because there were Machris and Chodesh Adar. So most of the people around were being silver. The second time was Shavuos. Which people's money came in? The people from around the faraway the towns around Eretz Yisrael. But the one of Sukkot came from far distant countries. So the one that came on Sukkot was almost always gold. So the buckets would be full. The last time, the buckets would be full of gold coins. Tony, the Beis elaborates a little bit. Even though the first time was Etzol, the second time was towns around Etzol, the third time for distant countries, every time they would also say for the whole of the Eden, all the Eden. So again, the first one is L'Shem Kol Yisrael, Shnia L'Shem Krochim Amukofin, U'L'Shem Kol Yisrael. V'Ashlish is L'Shem Bovad Omoda L'Shem Dunas Ochoikos L'Shem Kol Yisrael, for the whole of Kol Yisrael.
So you looked at it, it's got the first time. You can't finish.
No, you could still.
You didn't say the Shem is.
You're right. No, so that's what it says. Shem Klal Yisrael, the whole of Kol Yisrael. Okay. Tony, not Tamina Oshoino. Oh, what happened was like this. Let's say you took 3 buckets. So you start with the first bucket, you didn't finish it, you're allowed to go to the second bucket. You didn't finish the second bucket, you're allowed to go to the third bucket. If the third bucket gets finished, you then go back to the second bucket. The second bucket gets finished, you go to the first bucket. What happens if the first bucket? Yeah, but you had to use it in order. That means you had to take a bit from the first bucket, use that, a bit from the second bucket. But you didn't have to finish the first bucket before you started the second one. What happens if you finish the third bucket, you go to the second? You finish the second, you go to the first. You finish the first, what would you do? So I would have said, what should you do? Go back to the room and take some more. Oh, very good. It's called Shivayim. You can't do that. So what do? You ask the Yidden to give another one. No, you can't wait for Shavuos. What do you mean? You run out of money. We should pay Pesach Shavuos.
You do another collection.
You do another collection.
Amount of money in the chamber.
That's right. The money in the chamber would no. We're going to see what. But there was huge amounts of money in the chamber, and you tell everybody we want another collection. So if anybody says to you, I want a charity campaign, and you say, wait a second, you just made it, you haven't finished the money. No. Oh. Let's see the Gemara inside. It's interesting. I must admit, it's a hard. Not a minute shade after shesh b'shneir to minashneir. Even if it's still left in the first bucket, you can have the second bucket. Not a minute shneir after shesh b'shneir to minashneir. Once you've taken a bit, that means, as you said, Moshe, you have to do it in order. But it doesn't mean you have to finish it. That means you take a bit from the second, then you take a bit from the third. But you can't go to the third before you take the second. But once you've taken a bit from the second, you can then go on to the third if you wish. Then what happens is sholmo shlishis. If the third one's finished, chayz l'shneir. Sholmo shneir, the second one's finished, chayz l'shneir. You tell Klaisol, we want a new donation. It's very hard to picture it. Imagine, you got a room full of money. You took out 43 big buckets of silver, all finished. Price of sheep went very high. So now, in the room, there's like millions of... You say to Klaisol, we need a new collection, because it's Shuraim. Rameh argues. That a person has to be careful that even the shiraim have the kedusha of kodshim kodshim, because eventually you might come to use them. Says the big question over here: what's the connection between the first and the second that we say v'chein and so too? So Takim Chadatin says we see over here that the May will tell people be careful that you might use the leftovers for the wrong thing, you might come to use it. So from here we see that in Avodas Hashem, you have to always look in advance, look ahead. Now this next statement of Hilchos Ben Yoel has become very famous because the whole Sefer Mesilas Hashem is based on the next 3 lines of Gemara. So Vizus maybe de Nekius, Nekius maybe de Tahara, Tahara maybe de Kedusha, Kedusha maybe de Anova, Anova maybe de Yashchet, Yashchet maybe de Chasidus, Chasidus maybe de Kodesh, Kodesh maybe de Tches HaMesim, Tches HaMesim maybe de Eliyah Zochar HaTov. So if you read Mesilas Hashem, it goes to the whole Sefer. What? I don't remember. And he based the whole Gemara, and he says that if you follow this Gemara, you'll be able to be Mechaya Mason people. You'll be able to bring people back to life. All you have to do is just follow these 3 lines of Gemara. There's a Sefer, Shai Kedusha by Chaim Vital. And he writes there how you can become a Novi. I decided, let's start. So the first thing is, never waste a moment of not thinking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The second thing is make sure to keep every single mitzvah say and never be over say. So that's unfortunately, that's what's next. Then he's got more things. But he's wrote to safe. It's interesting that he wrote to safe how to become a Navi. When you think to yourself, like, how did he know? But it says Shem wrote to safe how to Tchias HaBeisim. But this safe about Mesilas Yesharim, you should know. Salanta said that you should use the Mesilas Yesharim as your Rebbe. Says Shalom should be your Rebbe. That is how he was magged it. And there are many Sfarim with Mesilas Yesharim. It's an unbelievable safe where he's magged exactly how your person is supposed to grow as a Yid. And he literally teaches a person how to behave from beginning to end, how to reach different levels. I'll just say one small point. It's a complicated point, but if I can get it clear. So Hashem splits two parts in Avodas Hashem. So Hiras Vizus Nekius is one, Precious Tar Chasidus is the second. Then he goes on to a third level, which is in the higher. But nicely select this. There are two parts in a person's avodah in life. One is to become a tzaddik, one is to become a chassid. A tzaddik is to do everything that the Torah says. A chassid is just like when a person loves somebody, he thinks up of new ideas what that person might want. So too a chassid comes up with a new understanding of what the Torah wants us to do, even of things that we've never thought about. That means even things which the Torah doesn't mention. Yaakov Nesker, so Yaakov says a Moshe. Let's say your father says to you, I fancy a cup of tea. Then you know that it's nice to have a cup of tea, not Pesach, when Pesach biscuits, have biscuits with it. So if your father asks you for A, and you work out A, B, and maybe C, that's the difference between the tzaddik and the chassid. So the Shalom explains that if being a chassid is the right thing, so the question comes up, why did Hashem not tell it to us? Why did Hashem not tell it to us? Again, but again, if you're supposed to be doing it, only meant to do it because
he's not asked. If he would have asked,
that in itself is being a chassid.
So is every Yid mechuyev to be a chassid? He says not. He says no. He says that's not what Akash Baruch Hu wanted. Akash Baruch Hu wanted there should be different levels in Yiddishkeit. But he says every person in Yiddishkeit is able to be zeicher to both as long as they remain attached to each other. He says a chassid who's only interested in being a chassid because he wants to grow himself is not a chassid and will not help Klal Yisrael. And somebody who's not a chassid, but attached himself to a chassid, reaches the level of chassidus. Because what Hashem wanted, it's like Lahabd. I always say it's what you got a climbing team, right? You want to conquer Everest, right? So what do you have? You have a support team, and you have the person climbers, and you have Sherpas, etc. If you all work as a team, you will get one person onto the peak, or onto the summit. Now, each person who works and does his part will help, and then can say, our team got the person to the summit. If the person who's climbing to the summit doesn't care about everybody else, is not interested in making the team succeed, he won't succeed, and the rest of the team won't succeed. It's the other way around. And so there's a lot of arichas about that there's two different halakim. And Emma's, he says there's three steps to each chelak. One day we'll talk about it more. Now the Gemara just says how we learn each one of these things. And what the Gemara does is one brings psukim which bring the two things which each one leads to the other together. The Gemara says, Vizus, maybe v'chilo michape. V'chilo is to complete, which is Vizus. Mechaper means to atone. It can also mean to cleanse. So Kippur is cleansing us, and Kilo is Vizus. So we see that one brings the next. That when you do everything correctly, you come to cleansing us. Nikiris baby day tahar. Dechsiv v'chipur lo v'akeren v'tohero. V'chipur, as we said, can also mean to clean. V'tohero means tahar. Tahar every day kedusha. Dechsiv v'tahar v'kedshu. Kedusha maybe day anova. Dechsiv kechor ma'avom v'niso shrichadad v'kodesh moy. Moy v'kodesh eshkod v'estako shval ruach. Baruch Hu talks about himself as being a kodesh and an onof. And nova maybe day yuas chet brings to yuas chet. Dechsiv ekiva nova yuas Hashem. That another leads to Yuas Shemaim. Yuas Chet B'Yevdei Chasidus. Chesed V'Chesed Hashem Einu V'Adei Lom Al Yeveov. Those who fear Hashem become Chasidim. Chasidus B'Biyah L'Dei Ruach HaKodesh. Techsiv Oz Dibata B'Chazon L'Chasidecho. That Hashem speaks to the Chasidim. So you see that Ruach HaKodesh is to the Chasid. Ruach HaKodesh B'Biyah L'Dei Tchias HaMeisim. Techsiv Nosati V'Ruchi Bochem V'Chiyisem, and you will become to life. Tchias HaMeisim B'Biyah L'Dei Liyah Zochel HaTov. Techsiv V'Nanech Shlach Lochem V'Silin Novi L'Fnei V'Yoim Hashem V'Godem V'Anoyo. And this is the last pasuk of Malachi, which was the last pasuk which we ever heard on the Nevuah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because there were no Nevi'im after Malachi. So this is the last HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised us that he'll bring Eliyahu Hanavi before the day which he'll bring Tchias HaMesim. So we see that Eliyahu Hanavi leads on to Tchias HaMesim. Tana v'Shem Amir. Kol mi shekavua be'Eretz Yisrael, those who live in the Eretz Yisrael, Udaber b'Lashon HaKodesh, who speaks in Lashon HaKodesh, ve'echol pe'osav v'tahar, make sure to always be toy and to eat things v'tahar. Ve'kol kriyash ma'boker ba'erev, ye mevusash ben olam haba is a ben olam haba is guaranteed to have an important point apart in olam haba. I saw that the Kloisenberger Rebbe has got a tshuva. If nowadays speaking in Lashon HaKodesh, is it a mitzvah or not? What? Eliyahu Hanavi before Tchias HaMesim. So the way around. You're right. So you're right. Yes, Tchias HaMesim before. No, that's not how the Quran says. It's maybe the daily yo by bringing Tchias HaMesim, Eliyahu Hanavi will come, so to speak. Yeah, it's mashma. It's totally to Mizah. Hadlach vek b'shlish sheplokim, hadlach vek b'shlish sheplokim, hadlach vek b'shlish sheplokim. We should be zeichet to learn in this world, in the next world, and to be zeichet to have it clear, and to learn it again and again. And I want to let's do the next mishnah. Sorry, because let's do it. What would they do with the money? We don't have a lechaim. You have to go home and have a lechaim. Loikichin ba would buy with it. Oh, you asked, what should we do with that money? To meet in the Talmud Musafin, v'nischem and nesachim. Ha'omer v'shtei alechem v'lechem aponim v'chol kabodos hatzibur. Shemei svichen. The halach is like this. On the year of Shemitah, you're not allowed to plant. Not allowed to plant. There's no new produce. No new produce. How in the world are you going to do the Korban Omer? The answer is the svichen. Does anybody remember what the word svichen means? Yeah. Something that grows by itself. How does something grow by itself? Because seeds get blown around. So what would happen is svichen be'emes, there's a big shaila if you're allowed to even eat them on Shemitah. But what they used to do is the Beis would send out messengers and they would look around the country and they would find a patch of land where there was svichen on the year of Shemitah, and they would put people 24/7 to stand around the patch, not allowing animals or humans to eat it. Now, who would pay these guards? Says the Mishnah, Shemei Svichen Deshvis, Tumas Halishka. They would get paid from the Tumas Halishka. If you want. Yes. We'll see. They took. Yeah, no, we took. What we'll do is we'll see there was a lot of things we took from Tumas Halishka, and something we took from the Shiur Halishka, like building the walls of Yerushalayim and things like that. Here, the Mishnah says that Shemei Svichen, those who guarded the plants that grew by themselves in the year of Shemitah, in order we should be able to have the Korban Omer, they took from the Tumas Halishka. A person could agree to be a guard for free. No, it has to come from Shot Sibur. And this is a serious Kabbalah which we can have again and again and again. There are certain Kabbalahs that have to come from Common Sibur. If I bring a sheep and I say, you bring the sheep as my Korban Tomid for the Klali Sol, good or no good? Not good. Why is it not good? Because it's become Sibur, it has to belong to the Sibur. So they said to Rabbi, if a person donates from his own free time to be a guard for the Shemei Svichen, what's going to happen? It's not really from the Tzibur. And that's the topic of tomorrow with Hashem. Okay, very good. Okay, Shkerech, very, very good. Moed. Mazel Tov, finishing a perek.
Why
We'll
do
put-
you need a
Count
roll?
it out. You can count it out, though.
Yeah, I hope there's a bar of that. I don't know if there is.
I'm married first, Tony.